How many hours is it going to take you to become fluent in Spanish? How many hours does it take the average person to become fluent in a language? First, I want to tell you why. Why do we even want to talk about this? Because so many people, they give up when they study a language. I think many more, I don't know what the studies actually say, but many more people who start studying a second language give up than those who continue and move on and go on to become fluent in a language. Why? Because you can imagine they get frustrated with it. They don't see progress. And so that's the reason that I'm telling you this, because if you knew, if I study this many hours of Spanish, when I get to this number of hours, I will be fluent. It's much more tangible, right? You can say, all right, I just have to put in this many hours and then I will be fluent. That's the main purpose of this video. To encourage you, to give you a goal, to make you realize that I just have to do A, B, and C. It's a matter of counting, and I'm going to reach my goals, and I will be fluent in Spanish. This is going to help you to be able to speak, to get to that first level of fluency. Let's call it that. It's the first level of fluency. It's when you can have a good conversation. So how many hours is it? It's 1,000 hours. So don't turn off the video because I'm going to tell you how to fill up those 1,000 hours. But if you can imagine that 1,000 hours, what does that represent? Imagine if you studied Spanish for 3 hours a day, or you spoke with somebody for 3 hours a day, every day for a year. So 3 times 365. So 3 times 300 is 900. So it's about, in a year, that's about 1,000. So if you did 3 hours every day for 1 year, you should be able to get to this basic level of fluency. Most people don't study a language for 3 hours every day for a year. It's pretty intense. I want to tell you, I did meet this woman once. She took a Spanish class with me, and so we spoke Spanish the whole time, and she spoke Spanish quite well. She was an American woman. She spoke a few languages, and I asked her what her strongest language was, and she said it was Chinese, it was Mandarin. She worked at the U.S. Embassy in Shanghai, or in Beijing, and her job was to interview Chinese people to see if they were eligible to get a visa to go to the United States, and she did it all in Chinese. I said, how did you learn Chinese? And her Spanish was so good. I said, how did you get your Chinese to be that much better? She says, well, I took a course in Washington, D.C. It was every day for 8 hours a day for 9 months. She went from zero to being able to speak Chinese well enough to do this job. Imagine, in 9 months, it was just speaking. They didn't look at the written language at all. It was all verbal. Kind of amazing. But it goes to show that depending on the person too, for some people it would be too much, 8 hours a day. It would just, after a while, you just couldn't absorb it. Some people need to take longer to absorb the language. But so you can kind of imagine if you only took 1 hour once a day, then it could take you about 3 years to get to that first level. And this is if you're consistent and you don't give up. Or what if you take 1 hour every other day? You see, it just slows it down. So this is to give you a goal. Is it a fixed absolute rule? No, because everybody learns language differently, but it gives you something to shoot at. And if you want, you can keep track of it, like on some type of calendar. Keep track of how many hours, calculate how many hours you've put in up to now, and then calculate how many you have left to get to that 1,000, that true 1,000 hour mark. And that will be like the beginning of fluency. At that point, you should be able to express your thoughts and have a good conversation. You might be making lots of little mistakes, but you should still be able to have a pretty good conversation. So let's talk about what's involved, what counts as the hours towards those 1,000 hours. Number one is speaking. Of course, speaking with other people. They can be non-native speakers or native speakers, but definitely book a class with me on italki, because then you can at least get that 1 hour with me once a week or twice or 3 times a week. And that'll be a good, solid, quality hour of speaking Spanish. Or book a class with some find a way to speak to another person in Spanish. Number two is reading out loud. I've said this before in many of my videos. Read out loud. The Spanish is perfect. It's coming out of your mouth. Your voice is going back to your ear. Having spoken perfect Spanish has a great effect. This definitely counts as time speaking Spanish and toward your 1,000 hours of Spanish. Number 3 is listening to Spanish. Now, I wouldn't do just any one of these except maybe for the speaking. If you just spoke Spanish for 3 hours a day or 4 or 5 or 6 hours a day, that definitely is the best option. But only listening to Spanish isn't going to get you fluent in Spanish, but it will contribute to that part of speaking, which when you're having a conversation with somebody, you need to be able to listen and understand them. So it's an important part, but it can't be done alone. You need to be speaking the language too. Number 4 is reading. Reading the language is great. Just reading silently, you don't have to read out necessarily out loud. That will contribute. Again, only reading the language will only help you so much. It helps you with your vocabulary, getting used to seeing the language and understanding it, your comprehension, but you need to be speaking the language too. So this is complementary. Number 5, a lot of people don't even think about this one, but it's thinking in Spanish. Yes, you should definitely, if you haven't done this as an exercise, take 5 minutes today and just think in Spanish. If you think you can't do that, do 1 minute. After this video, try to think in Spanish for 1 minute. And if you say, I don't know enough Spanish to think in Spanish with whatever words that you know in Spanish, even if you're just practicing the conjugations or counting from 1 to 100 or saying the days of the week. Just recite anything that you can possibly say or think about it in Spanish. And you might say, well, that doesn't count. But does it count if I'm thinking in my mind, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday? Aren't I thinking in English? I'm not thinking in Russian or in Chinese. It's English. So if you do it in Spanish, domingo, lunes, martes, miércoles, jueves, viernes, sábado. You're thinking in Spanish. It's basic, but that's your level. So as you learn more, you can do more. You can think sentences, conversations, and it'll get more and more complex. Now, the following activity counts as double. You can count this, each minute of this, as double the time. And what is that? It's when anything that you're doing with a strong emotion, like arguing. So I'm not encouraging you to have arguments in Spanish, but if you do, if you have a friend that you talk to, but you love to argue with each other and it's in Spanish, that counts as double the time. Any strong emotion has a double effect on your language acquisition. The other one is if you speak in public. So it's strong emotions, or when you speak in public, anytime you have a lot of pressure, or stress, a stressful situation, this counts as double. So if you're giving speeches, you join some type of speaking club or Toastmasters, but in Spanish, that does exist. If you look for it, you can try to do that. And the other one that counts double is telling jokes. So if you can tell jokes in Spanish, it takes a lot, right? Because you have to learn how to tell the joke. They don't have to be funny, but learn how to tell the joke, set it up, and give the punchline. But doing that's also a type of public speaking. So just remember that this accumulating 1,000 hours is just the beginning of fluency, but you can do it. And at least you know that when you reach that point, now at 1,000 hours, I should be at the beginning level of fluency. So now I can express my ideas, have good conversations. I don't have to be looking at a dictionary all the time. But obviously, you're not going to stop there. That's just the beginning of your road to more and more fluency. As you continue, you will perfect your Spanish, learn more vocabulary, improve your grammar and your accent. And I hope you do that with me in my classes. So have a great time doing this. Keep working on your Spanish, and you know what to do to support my channel. And so just remember that millions of people speak Spanish fluently, and you will too.